If there's one thing I've learned about YouTube, it's that people love making tier lists. They break out that cool chart with the S at the top and the F at the bottom and get to spend the next 30 minutes to an hour talking about the particular pros and cons of elements of something they love. It could be Dota characters, war movies, or maybe soup viscosity. Whatever it is, it's easy to do, easy to make, and can be entertaining to watch. But there is one thumbnail you'll probably never see. I ranked every single Warhammer 40k video game. It was attempted once before, but it's rumoured that the particular content creator involved went mad during the process and was live sighted running through Bluewater Shopping Centre covered in chocolate pudding, shouting "Mud for the Mud God" at startled shoppers. So, what's the problem? Well, for one thing, there are just so many damn games. There are at least 60 of them at the last count, and at average release prices you would have had to spend over $3,000 to pick them up over the years, which is almost enough money to actually play the hobby for real. Secondly, if you wanted to spend a few hours playing and evaluating them carefully each evening before making your tier list, you would be at it for over a year. However, I had a plan. Due to their particular nature, I have devised a new method of tier list creation that's specific to 40k games, which should allow us to put them into their appropriate tiers without actually needing to buy or play them all. Firstly, we need to throw out the old tier list template. It might be suitable for cheese nutrition or Monster energy drink, but it's not suitable for us. We have this new board with new categories that has undergone precision tweaking to make it fit our source material. Our first tier, the top tier, is called Actually Good. Our second and final tier is called Games that are bad, or games that were somewhat enjoyable but never actually good enough to be called good, had a lukewarm reception, and are largely unremarkable and forgettable. No, I've had to pick a cut-off time of games that were released within the last year because new ones arrive so often that I would be stuck in an infinite loop of editing otherwise. We'll start with the bottom tier and add the following titles. This lot. You've probably heard of some of them, and you may even own a couple. You may have enjoyed them a bit, but never thought to pick them up years later and try again. You may have even played through the entire campaign, but you wouldn't have recommended them to a friend. What about the top tier? Well, first let's go with Final Liberation. Sure, it looks like hot sewage these days, but back in its time it was literally epic. Secondly, we have Space Marine. I don't care what anyone says, this game was awesome. It's a single-player, third-person shooter action game where you get to murder your way through a well-constructed campaign, rich with 40k lore, themes and backdrops. The last spot on the top of the tier list is reserved for Dawn of War. I'm not quite sure where Dawn of War 2 fits in, but Dawn of War 3 definitely doesn't belong up here. I think we all know where Dawn of War 3 should sit. To talk about what happened to Dawn of War 3, we must first talk about the first two installments. The original Dawn of War was released in 2004, developed by Relic Entertainment and published by THQ. Relic gave the world an RTS that included all of the core elements of the genre, but actually innovated and introduced new concepts that some modern games still use today. Older games would have had us sending out peasants, peons, drones or harvesters to gather resources, but Dawn of War introduced us to strategic points, where we needed to capture and hold certain key areas of the map to increase our resource generation. Additionally, it would also introduce us to squads that could be reinforced, upgraded and customised, rather than the traditional collection of individual combatants we were used to. And they didn't stop the innovation there. You could attach hero units to squads, your infantry could take cover for defensive bonuses, and they could even lose their nerve and become ineffective. Each one of these were new concepts in RTS, and their inclusion both pushed the boundaries of the genre while also respecting the tabletop game that they represented. The game was fun, dynamic and challenging, and they included a single-player campaign that was engaging and fit the setting perfectly. They even included a cool army painter, so you could represent your own Space Marine chapter or Orc clan on the battlefield. These things are what made Dawn of War not just one of the best RTS games ever released, but also one of the best examples of how to make a video game based on an existing intellectual property. So many publishers try to jam an existing property into a generic game for a quick win, or don't understand the property well enough to do it justice in a video game version. But this was not the case with Dawn of War. You have to congratulate Relic here, they did a rare thing. Dawn of War was so successful that we would see an expansion a year later, and then 2 more over the next 3 years. Each one included a new set of single player missions and playable races, and the last 2 really expanded on the single player to include a whole new strategy layer and a campaign system. By the end of its 4-year cycle, Dawn of War would have multiple single player campaigns, 9 playable races, and a bucket load of maps. So, to surmise Dawn of War, critically acclaimed, universally loved, and commercially successful. So, I guess we had better talk a little about Dawn of War 2 because it's a bit of an oddity. Only a year after the final expansion, Dawn of War 2 arrived. It was a modern title with vastly superior graphics, and at a distance it looked a bit like a sequel to Dawn of War. But it wasn't. Dawn of War 2 focused heavily on squad combat, inter-mission character development, and smaller skirmishes. It dispensed with much of the in-mission resource management and ditched base building entirely. And I think the action strategy label would be far more accurate than calling it an RTS. Normally, this would have been an absolute disaster, but it wasn't, because although it was very different, it was still a good game. It was fun, challenging, and also importantly, respected the setting. It wasn't exactly what RTS fans of Dawn of War were looking for, but we didn't mind because we still had Dawn of War. The latest expansion had only arrived in the previous year, so it hardly fell out of date at this point. I think it's fair to call Dawn of War 2 a companion rather than a sequel to the first Dawn of War. It was different, sure, but both games could coexist. Some people would like one, some would like the other, some would like both, and it was successful enough to see not 1 but 2 expansions over the following couple of years. Unfortunately, in the background of all this, THQ had got a little big for its boots. It had seen massive success in the early to mid 2000s, almost rivaling Activision, and as such had bought or opened over 25 development studios and 5 publishing arms, releasing hundreds upon hundreds of games. Unfortunately, as the years rolled on, budgets for games got bigger, sales got smaller, until in 2012, unable to make a $50 million repayment on a loan, THQ filed for bankruptcy. Relic, a subsidiary of THQ and the makers of Dawn of War, would be sold to Sega as part of the administration. Between 2004 and 2011, there had been 7 new titles bearing the Dawn of War name. But the following 6 years there would be none, until finally, in 2017, with great excitement and fanfare, Sega would disappoint us all with Dawn of War 3. I consider this to be one of the greatest missed opportunities of RTS. StarCraft 2 was 7 years old at this point, and we hadn't seen a new Age of Empires or Command & Conquer game for around the same time. If you were going to release an amazing new game in a much-loved franchise, now was the perfect time to do it. But not sure whether to make a sequel to Dawn of War or Dawn of War 2, Relic picked the worst possible option to try and do both in a single game. Fans of the first Dawn of War found a dumbed-down RTS with a fraction of the buildings, units, tech trees and customizations of the original, whereas action strategy fans of the second game found a stripped-down version of their hero units, gated behind dull, characterless squads and resource gathering. As if this wasn't bad enough, Relic tried to introduce MOBA-like elements to some of the multiplayer gameplay, adding a third direction to a game that already had one direction too many. It was a classic case of if you try to please everyone, you end up pleasing no one. In trying to build the game around strong, unique hero squads, you devalue the other entities around them. And in trying to build a resource-managing, base-building army simulator, you devalue the unique hero squads within it. To make matters worse, there was one other lesson that Relic forgot. Make game decisions that respect the source material. Fans of 40k will notice when you don't. Space Marines don't group up in ad hoc squads and pick a random weapon from the gun bin. They are arranged in a very specific way as dictated by a very old book written by a demigod. A tactical squad contains 10 Marines. They carry bolters, but they must also be flexible, so they carry a heavy weapon to deal with heavy stuff, and a special weapon to deal with, well, special stuff. This is the Tactical Squad, the single most iconic and recognisable military formation from the entire 40k universe. A Tactical Squad is not 5 dudes running around with plasma guns. These rules were created to prevent another civil war, and if you don't follow the rules, then Imperium logic dictates that you must want another civil war. And if you want the God Emperor wrapped up in another centuries-long civil war, then it follows that you must be a heretic. If you were to create a tier list of things you don't want to be suspected of in the Imperium of Man, I think it's pretty safe to say that heresy would be up there with mutant, alien and unclean. So, I wonder what's next for strategy fans of the 40k universe. Warhammer fantasy lovers have been spoilt with the Total War series over the years, and I think it's our turn for a bit of love. This said, it might not be the right time for a whole new Dawn of War game right now, and looking at Relic's last strategy offerings, I think they might need to re-evaluate their choices before embarking on a grand rejuvenation of the franchise. However, I do feel that the original Dawn of War could really benefit from a remaster, as long as it's done by the right team. I would love to see the old game reborn with up-to-date graphics, conveniences and support, and I think there might be a market for it. Dawn of War still has over 1,000 concurrent players on Steam. Not bad for a 15-year-old game. Not bad at all. I bet you want to look up Dawn of War 3 as a comparison, don't you? I'll save you the time. It's 70. You could fit them all on a bus. Maybe they are all on a bus. Maybe it's this bus. We'll never know. Hi, I'm Calvin. Thanks for joining me as we examine some of the dark grimness of the third Dawn of War. Please leave a comment so I can practice my reading, and if you enjoyed this, then like and subscribe.